Yesu ni yule yule, hajabadilika.
Yesu ni yule yule, hajabadilika.
Yesu ni yule yule, hajabadilika.
Yule jana na milele, hajabadilika.
Yesu ni yule yule, hajabadilika.
Yesu ni yule yule, hajabadilika.
Yesu ni yule yule, hajabadilika.
Yule jana na milele, atabaki kuwa Mungu.
Yesu ni yule yule, hajabadilika.
Yesu ni yule yule, hajabadilika.
Yesu ni yule yule, hajabadilika.
Asante sana. That beautiful music from Tabi and the Gospel Ministers Band, bringing us to the start of the main program. Ladies and gentlemen, again, welcome to day 3 and the final day of this 9th Devolution Conference here in the beautiful county of Homa Bay. My name is Michelle Ngele Odhiambo, and I have the pleasure of guiding you through today's program. We're honored this morning to be joined by distinguished leaders from the national government, the Senate, National Assembly, the county governments, development partners, and civil society as well. We welcome you all and acknowledge all dignitaries present here today, and thank you all for your continued commitment to moving devolution forward. Today's theme is financing equity and inclusion. It is a topic that sits right at the heart of making devolution work for all Kenyans. We'll be asking how national government and county governments can ensure that every citizen, regardless of where and who they are, has access to equitable resource allocation, even and especially the most marginalized. But before we get into today's program, a quick recap of what happened yesterday. The theme yesterday was human rights and social justice, looking at how county governments can lead at the forefront as protectors of human rights and social justice. We had a powerful 7-member panel discussion there, reminding us that the Bill of Rights in the Constitution is not just ink on paper, but really a living promise for every Kenyan in this country. The mid-morning side events also brought critical calls to action. Among them was finalizing affirmative action regulations to move devolution forward, integrating human resource systems, and even conversations as basic as enforcing return-to-school policies for adolescent mothers in the country. The day's highlight yesterday was, of course, that address by our chief guest, retired Honorable former Prime Minister Raila Odinga, who underscored efficient resource allocation as key to moving devolution forward, to ensuring equity, inclusion, and social justice in our country. And of course, much later, we all ended with a wonderful Homa Bay welcome, a dinner hosted by the Governor, Gladys Wanga, that I suspect that some of us might not forget. But let's now dive into our main session, ladies and gentlemen, and that is sealing the fault lines and the strategies for action in financial inclusivity. We're asking, how do we make sure that no Kenyan is locked out of opportunity? And to set the stage for this conversation, it is my pleasure to welcome our keynote speaker, who is a visionary in the field of economic transformation. His name is Dr. Abraham Rugo, the Executive Director of Budgeti Hub, a man who's dedicated his entire career to ensuring that budgets are not just numbers, but tools for inclusion, inclusivity, and equality. Mr. Rugo has over 20 years in experience in decentralization, participatory governance, and public finance management in Kenya. He has previously worked at the Institute of Economic Affairs and as a public policy and devolution consultant between 2014 and 2017. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me in welcoming to the stage our keynote speaker, Dr. Abraham Rugo. A round of applause, please. Karibu sana.
Thank you so much, Michelle, for that warm introduction. And thank you so much to everybody. Distinguished guests, delegates, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great pleasure for me to be able to address us today at this. We are dealing with height issues here. These podiums should be short people compliant. So it's my joy to be able to address us today on this 20th year of my career in the devolution space. And it's a joy to also be addressing it in Homa Bay County, where I share a lot of history with the governor of this place. We served with her in the early days at Kenyatta University as student leaders. We've come a long way from the early debates at Bomas and full establishment of our devolved system. And this plenary today is especially special because it's focusing on inclusion and equity by channeling resources for services and enterprise through decentralized financing. Now, Kenya's 2010 Constitution, which we love and cherish, places equity and inclusion at its core. As a matter of fact, it mentions the word equity 5 times, equitable 11 times, and equal over 16 times. This was no accident. The Constitution was designed to deal with historical marginalization in Kenya to ensure that all persons, regardless of the regions, benefit from public resources and that all had a fair shot at prospering in their country and the country they so much love. When we designed our devolved system, we were united on one thing. It offered the best opportunity to unlock development across the entire country by devolving fiscal, political, and administrative power closer to the people, giving them voice and choice, and in turn, spurring the production and consumption of goods and services. But now, as I think of the 20 years I have worked in this space and the Constitution turning 15, I'm forced to consider and ask all of us to ask, has devolution worked? How is devolution today? If Kenya's devolved system were a person, and I borrow this from Gladys Wanga, who spoke on the opening day, it will now be entering its teenage years. All of us experienced teenagehood in different ways. But one thing was sure, we had changes in our bodies, our thinking, and our mental outlook. Central to that stage was the search for identity, asking the question, who am I? And the desire for full independence to do things our own way. Of course, many of us were limited by resources and exposure of our social guides, including parents and guardians and older ones, and the villages that we came from. Could it be comparing devolution as this teenage is actually ready to fully fly, but we are held back by limitations, some of our own making, and others rooted in structures we have not fully honored or implemented? And therefore, this morning, as we ask about how does this adolescent find full identity of independence and growth, allow me to focus on 5 fault lines that I think are important for us to focus on as we move forward. The first one is constitutionalism and not just having a constitution. This calls for a mindset shift, and I have heard the word mindset shift used a lot in this conference. Constitutionalism is about the values central to which respect for humanity, and especially the rule of law, plays a critical role. Devolution is not about counties. Devolution is about distribution of power to deliver proximate services to all in public and to enhance equitable development. It is not about county governments that operate at the mercy of a benevolent big brother or big sister. On the other hand, it's about county governments that serve and are led by the inclusive public service that reflects the face of the county. In my observations over the last 15 years, I noticed a lethargy among national level players to see themselves as side A of this devolution coin. In other words, devolution is the same coin, county governments on one side, national government on the other side. On the other hand, one notices a systemic marginalization of ethnic minorities by a majority communities, ethnic and even clans in some counties. And I propose it's time for us to establish a full inter-county conversations, equity conversations that ensure that there is representation, there is equitable distribution of resources within counties and not just across counties. The second fault line is a fault line of functions versus finances. Our Constitution provides that functions should be followed by finances. Subsidiarity is a key principle here, where each level is supposed to perform the functions that are best due to it. And complete of transfer of functions and the attendant resources is imperative. But why this? Functions without sufficient finances sets up expectations, but none can be effectively fulfilled. Here we have a case that while the national government budget, for instance, has grown 250 times, to be precise, 248%, since 2013, counties' allocation has only increased by 110%. Are counties doing only half or a quarter, almost a third of that? Yet counties are responsible for heavy sectors such as health, and in the case of health, it's 48% versus 52%, yet 90% of the health facilities are under the responsibility of counties. In agriculture, it's 77% to the national government and 23% to county governments, yet counties are responsible for a large part of agriculture. Those are just examples. In fact, county allocation is now just about 10% of the total national budget. But of course, if you removed public debt, then it will come to about 14%. The question is, are counties responsible for only 10% of the functions? Following the gazettement of all functions by the Intergovernmental Technical Relations Committee, it is time to reestablish the cost of functions, appreciating adjusted population, cost of delivering services, and improved state of development. And on this, I want to make a proposal. Can this be done from the bottom up? Not to use the political framing of it, can counties, having delivered health services for the last 10, 12 years, now give us the actual cost from their perspective of delivering health services? Can counties, having managed trade services, give us the cost of actually delivering these trade services? And therefore, then we have a more realistic perspective and proportionality. The work, of course, of IGTRC will be critical. And the zero-based budgeting gives us this opportunity where we reimagine how we budget. The third fault line is the quality services and not just structures. All of us in this room and across the country will agree with me that we have established many structures. We have so many structures all claiming to be delivering public services. Achieving equity and inclusion means that the established structures work to deliver services to all, especially the very needy, whose only option is public services, and I'll speak about that shortly later. Coordination based on harmonized structure is central for this. In a tight fiscal space, efficiency is very critical and requires constant review of how to do more with less, or at a minimum, manage what can be done unfaced over time. But it is also time to rethink the structures of government. Do we need structures of both levels of government all the way to the grassroots? Do we need a ward admin, a chief, a sub-chief, a ward assembly official, a CDF office, and the other funds and their officials across board? Or can these actually be harmonized as was envisioned in the Constitution? Can we strengthen the County Integrated Development Plan in the real sense and spirit of the Constitution, where it is actually an integrated development plan, where every agency, every actor, every player who is doing something in Homa Bay is guided by the Homa Bay County Integrated Development Plan, so that then we avoid duplication and abuse of resources in the sense of wastage of resources in the sense of not coordinating, be it in health, in infrastructure, and even security. In fact, at this point, I'll point out that I think the success of devolution is going to be based on the intergovernmental relations framework that we established at the different sectors. Think about healthcare and the issues that we are dealing with. Can you imagine a situation where we have better coordination around UHC? My colleague keeps reminding me, UHC will succeed the day governors and county officials are the ones shouting loudest about its success, and not just by the national government. Number 4, before I go to my 5th point, is accountability and not just transparency. Our research at Budgeti Hub, and I'm joined by my colleagues here, and by the International Budget Partnership, over the last 10 years, has shown, and I would invite us to 356 booth to just see some of the numbers for your counties, has shown that both national and county governments have become increasingly transparent. In fact, as for the 2024 survey, 64% of information that is needed from county governments and 55% of the national government is available. At the touch of a button here, you actually can go to the Treasury website and download the budget for Homa Bay County or for the other county. But how does this relate to the state of accountability? Does it mean that counties are also 64% accountable for every coin and every shilling that they receive? The same county budget transparency shows, however, that only 12 out of 100, 12 percentage points is reporting on public participation. In other words, there is less engagement with the citizens as opposed to the transparency around it. While more coins are counted, we believe that more needs to count. The resources needs to count. Is Kenyans' lived reality reflective of meaningful transparency? Because transparency is not an end in itself. It is a means to accountability. Reports by the OAG, the Auditor General's Office, indicate a gripping picture. While not a generality, as has been demonstrated in this conference, the cry for accountability is loud and painful. It's patients receiving delayed or not treatment. It's the children who are not in school. And for your information, 1.3 million children are not in school, largely because they cannot afford. It's businesses that cannot make ends meet due to difficult space of doing business, and that will be my next point. It's citizens getting apathetic for no action to their input. And therefore, the gains of being accountable need to be the forefront of our transparency. There is no other option but being accountable. And number 5, and my last point, and this is focusing on incomes. We need incomes and not just opportunities. I think the current conversation is that there are so many opportunities that are being created. Kenyans are hardworking. They have work, but the incomes are not keeping in tandem with the cost of living. Look at this. 80% of the 20 million Kenyans who have something are in the informal sector or in the informal space. Inclusion policies, therefore, need to balance formalization and supporting those stuck in informality. This, of course, will not change overnight. Most Kenyans are accessing money from private sector, mobile money, chamas, and not government, not the Hustler Fund, not NHIF, not NSSF. 45.6% of the 18 to 25 years rural youth are excluded from financial access. But what is the state of unemployment? The reality is that 4 out of every 10 Kenyans is poor. 40% of Kenyans are poor, according to the KNBS reports. But the most shocking number is that 7 out of 10 Kenyans aged between 15 to 35 years are unemployed. In other words, you have 17 million who are in this informal space, but they cannot make ends meet. I'm convinced that the focus of government moving forward in addressing this fault line should be to ensure that people in business are able to make a living in the easiest and least harmful way possible. Counties need to understand that their role is not necessarily to provide credit to businesses, because private sector can do this, but to reduce the barriers to being a financially viable business. And on this, they need to address 2 big challenges: the cost of doing business and corruption, and I'll come to that in a minute. Government, I believe, is to be a facilitator of enterprises and not the enterprise itself. The government has to make a critical decision on its philosophy to development on whether the government wants to be in business or support businesses. And the argument for this is very clear, that public sector is not the most efficient mechanism of employment creation, and not even sustainable as it were. The reforms on SAGAs, for instance, provide us an important opportunity on this subject to be able to divest from enterprise and let businesses thrive. Public debt, especially domestic borrowing, needs also to be cognizant of this, because government cannot compete with the private sector, which we also expect of them to be able to provide employment. And therefore, it will not only save the government vital and now new, even more limited resources, but it will reduce scenarios where the government competes with industry. Specifically, to lower the cost of doing businesses, I would like to make a couple of proposals. One, is it time to consolidate for impact? Think about all the individual initiatives that different counties are making. Is it time to consolidate around the economic blocks, for instance? Think about enabling environment that will be able to make business possible, be it in infrastructure development, be it in manufacturing. But a critical thing that is often left out is that a key part of enhancing the business environment is giving citizens disposable income. How do you do that? You do that by ensuring that public services that business and their employees depend on are accessible, whether you're thinking about registration, whether you're thinking about water, accessibility through roads, electricity, and healthcare. Because that reduces the private consumption for these services, because it doesn't make sense to pay taxes and still provide for these services privately, and lowering the cost of doing it business. Is it time to make it easier to pay taxes and offer tax incentives? Tax incentives can be used as alternatives to enterprise loans, particularly for interest groups like persons with disability and women. And finally, counties cannot talk about financial inclusion without talking about corruption. We cannot give with one hand and take with the other. We cannot claim and have the rhetoric around dealing with corruption and not addressing it. And therefore, the rule of law, and I go back to constitutionalism, needs. In closing, I think we have a great opportunity to make sure this adolescent devolution baby or young boy, young girl actually has a future. And in so doing, I call on all of us to be able to roll our sleeves, get to work, work in collaboration, work in coordination to make sure that we succeed. I thank you very much.
Another round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, for our keynote speaker. That is Dr. Rugo, a very insightful address there to begin our conversation on financing equity and inclusivity. And perhaps he has reminded us that inclusivity is not charity. It's simply smart economics, and perhaps county governments really need to think about it in that way. Now, to steer our conversation, as we have the conversation on action, or strategic action for financial inclusivity, we have Ms. Wangari Muikia. She is the Managing Director of Expertise Global. She will be moderating a panel of distinguished leaders as well as experts, all bringing a unique perspective to the table on how to finance equity and inclusivity in our county governments. Wangari Muikia is a Harvard-trained African fiscal policy economist. She has over 20 years of experience in finance management and has led fiscal reforms across Africa by working with governments, the World Bank, the IMF, UNICEF, as well as UN Women. She's also a frequent voice in global policy forums, as well as media, advocating for data-driven strategies to promote sustainable and transparent governance across various sectors. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Wangari Muikia to take her seat on stage. Ms. Wangari Muikia will be leading a panel of high-level guests, and among them is the Governor of Nandi County, Governor Stephen Sang, currently serving as the Governor of Nandi County and the Chief Whip of the Council of Governors, having been re-elected on the 9th of August 2022 for his second term, and an advocate of the High Court of Kenya as well, with a bachelor's law degree from the University of Nairobi. We also have with us on the panel Omar Oluga, the Principal Secretary for the State Department of Medical Services. He is a man leading healthcare technocrat, as well as a consultant offering thought leadership and health systems design expertise. And of course, he will be joining us on that panel discussing how to finance equity and inclusivity. Also on that panel today is Senator Eddie Oketch. He is the chair of the Senate Committee on Roads, Transportation, and Housing. Senator Oketch will also be joining us. Ladies and gentlemen, let's please clap them on stage as they take their seats. Senator Oketch serves as the chairperson, Roads, Transport and Housing Committee, and also the vice chairperson of the County Public Investment Committee. He's also a member of the Budget and Finance Committee. He is a visionary business leader, having founded Ongoza, which is an SME incubator, and as well as the Anywhere Group, which is a fintech provider of micro asset loans. Ladies and gentlemen, Senator Eddie Oketch. Also joining us on stage is Honorable Samuel Atandi. He is the Member of Parliament for Alego Usonga constituency, Siaya County, and currently chairs the Budget and Appropriations Committee of Kenya's National Assembly. He holds a Bachelor of Arts degree from Egerton University, and before joining politics, Honorable Atandi had a distinguished banking career. Ladies and gentlemen, Honorable Samuel Atandi. Also joining us on stage is Honorable Shege Mwaura. Honorable Shege Mwaura is the Member of County Assembly for Ngara Ward in Nairobi City County. He has over 10 years of experience in public policy, focusing on devolution, social accountability, and parliamentary development. He has held key roles, including Majority Whip between 2017 and 2018, Acting Speaker, and served on several committees, including Budget, Transport, and the Public Accounts Committee. Ladies and gentlemen, Honorable Shege Mwaura. We also have Ms. Nyabenyi Tito Tipo. She is the FAO representative in Tanzania, and since 16th May 2024, she also serves as the FAO representative ad interim in Kenya. She has over 30 years of development experience focusing on agri-food system transformation to enhance food, nutrition, and security and support the 2010 agenda. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a round of applause to Dr. Nyabenyi Tipo. And last but not least, we have Ms. Frida Githugu. Ms. Frida Githugu is a gender equality expert and head of women's rights at the Irene M. Stillen Foundation. She oversees grants for women's rights initiatives and formerly served as the executive director of GROOTS Kenya, where she led impactful programs advancing women's leadership, economic autonomy, as well as financial inclusion. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for Frida Githugu. And that is our complete panel. Ladies and gentlemen, let me now give it up to the moderator, Wangari Muikia, to carry on this conversation. He's coming. He's not here. He's not here. Yeah. So I will replace.
Okay, good, just barely afternoon. I hope you're all well. And it's wonderful to be here today with such a distinguished panel. I would like to take the most benefit of the time that we have together. So I'll just give short remarks and then dive right into the questions with everybody. So I hope you're all ready for an exciting and informative panel. So I want to really thank everybody here today. My name is Wangari Muikia, as mentioned, and I'm an Africa Fiscal Policy Specialist. I am also the Managing Director of Expertise Global, which is a public finance management firm working with county governments, the private sector, and other stakeholders to maximize public service delivery for counties. Now, this year's Devolution conference is very special for Kenya, because it comes at a time where systemic economic inequalities and disparities are at a crossroads in every way, shape, or form. Firstly, economically, while we have some great progress, the CBR rate is going down, the central bank rate is going down. We're having alternative discussions when it comes to public debt, now looking about PPPs. We still have a very, very high public debt though. Inflationary pressures are still present in food and fuel, and that's reshaping household incomes and business budgets. Socially, we have a really vibrant young population. The demographic is very active, but if we have high unemployment and rising cost of living, we have a lot of protests and widening the access to basic services. Politically, even political devolution has been going very well. We have several working structures, and I think we're very excited about that. But there's still a lot of intense debates around the framework for devolution, the political framework, things around the wage bill, unbundling of functions, and the like. So there's a lot of change there. And then culturally, thanks to the work of many of my colleagues here, including Bajeti Hub, many Kenyans are more informed and more vocal about what's happening in the public finance space. They're understanding budgets, they're understanding how money is spent, and they're looking for a lot more accountability. They're looking for fairness, opportunity, and accountability. But at the heart of all of this is a crucial question. How do we ensure that every Kenyan, regardless of where they live or who they are, has access to the financial opportunities that can break the cycles of poverty and open doors to prosperity? And here, devolution stands as one of our most powerful tools. By bringing resources, decision-making, and service delivery closer to the people, it creates the potential for tailored solutions that respond directly to local realities by building, for example, feeder roads to financing women-led enterprises, improving local health facilities, to supporting farmers with timely inputs. And when done right, devolution is not just a governance model, it's a direct pathway to economic empowerment and inclusive growth. So today we are honored to have the audience of distinguished guests. Thank you very much for being here. from government leaders to development partners and grassroots champions who will help us dive deep into assessing our progress. So now, if you'll allow me, I would love to start with Thank you. So our objective in this session is to examine the role of subnational governments in promoting access to financial opportunities in order to address systemic economic inequalities and disparities. And I'd like to start with Senator Eddie Oketch, right? Just to set the background, as mentioned by Dr. Rugo, about 10% of the national budget is what is going to devolved functions, right? We're still going through a lot of discussions around with the IGRTC, devolving functions, unbundling and devolving functions. And I think recently we had a slew of functions that were devolved. I think the remaining functions were devolved. But still, counties are arguing that we still don't have enough resources, right? 10% of the current budget is still low. It's 15% of nationally audited statements, but still to manage all the functions the 47 counties are supposed to run is quite challenging. So the question I have is, one of the core mandates of the Finance and Budget Committee of Senate is to consider allocation of national revenue amongst the counties and the national budget. Would you consider the Senate's role successful in ensuring counties get their equitable share of national revenue, given that currently the counties only get 10%?
Thank you. I think what I will start by saying is that all the around shared resources or division of revenue between the national government and the county government are constitutional imperative. They are constitutional imperative in the sense that our constitution is very prescriptive in terms of how this division of revenue should happen. So when you start with Schedule 4 of the Constitution, it is very clear on what devolved functions are to the counties. And actually, it's interesting that if you do a proper observation, you will realize that those devolved functions actually touches on basic needs of our people, from water to agriculture, to healthcare, to infrastructure, to housing. If you look at all of them, they touch on the basic need of our people. Now, with the question of how do we then share resources that come in our national coffers equitably, it is defined in Article 203 of the Constitution. And that article, there is one side that the national government, and sometimes also the National Assembly, want us to focus on the most, which is saying that county government will be given about 15% of the last audited financials that we have in the country. The first problem is that those audits, despite the fact that the Auditor General will come with them on time, sometimes the approval of them delay at the National Assembly. So for instance, while we are sharing revenue in this year's budget 2024, 2025, 2026, what we are using is a 2021, 2022 financials that were last approved by Parliament. So already you can see that the counties will be disadvantaged. The second thing is that the Senate will always do its role. Again, it's a constitutional imperative, because if you look at the translation of those, revenue sharing under Article 95 of the Constitution, that is 4B, and if you also look at the role that CRA also plays in trying to define all these equitable concept, the idea was to make sure that counties can be viable. Because these counties are run almost like commercial entities. They are that's the only place where the governor becomes a chief executive. So commercial viability of counties means that counties must run their non-discretionary expenses and their discretionary expenses. But you find that because money do not follow these functions, sometimes counties just end up running payroll. And we have seen this especially with the smaller counties. About 16 of them just end up running payroll. That's why the Constitution anticipated this kind of scenario and created CRA under Article 216 and 217, so that the CRA can be able to give input together with the Senate on what could be other metrics in terms of making sure that the budget is actually fair. For instance, you'll find that the national government share of the budget in a current terms and absolute terms always grows. But because they are sticking on the 15%, the county one always shrinks. So these are challenges that overall, as I finish, are caused by the fact that the Senate is limited in its legislative role. For instance, all the money bills that we look at in this country, all Article 110 of the Constitution, is all given to National Assembly, but the Senate does not have an input in that. So I think that it's high time that when we are reviewing the success of devolution, Senate must now start having a full legislative role in order to be able to make sure that the Senate can therefore be able to have a bird's eye view position in the entire revenue sharing question.
And how would they do that? How do you think, what are the first steps to do that, to try to get a more firm role? And if you do, then also how will you enhance the revenues that are going down to the counties? What are ideas?
The Constitution has been very, very loose in terms of the term called money bills. And that looseness has left most of the legislative pieces. For instance, if you think about the role of Finance and Budget Committee, whatever has been determined by my counterpart here, Sam Atandi, in his committee in the National Assembly, pretty much is almost law. That's why every single year you see that there's something called mediation committee between our committee and our counterparts in National Assembly. And this is happening because the loose term of money bills in our Constitution have all been given to National Assembly. And that's why, as a Senate, we have sponsored a bill that seeks to be able to review the Constitution to expand the legislative mandate of the Senate. When you have that, then these negotiations outside the process of appropriation will not happen. What will happen is that the Senate will now have a full mandate in terms of legislation to make sure that all functions that have been given to county are catered for during the budget-making process. Yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you. So I think you've mentioned strongly the role of the National Assembly, and naturally go to Honorable Atandi. In your role as a chairperson of the Finance and Budget, the Budget and Appropriations Committee, I apologize. So we've talked a lot around the cost of devolved functions and the fact that the resources that are going down to the counties appear or are insufficient, right? And I know when there was an unbundling of functions, the question of whether do you fund the function fully or do you fund it according to what the resources available are? And I know that there's a push and pull around that. But we all know that that is the money. That 10% is what we're using to ensure that counties are providing opportunities, economic growth opportunities at their levels, ensure that they're providing credit access initiatives, and they're really trying to backstop the financial context of the counties, but also ensure that the economy is growing stronger. But then there's on the other side, right? The debt pressures are very high. So in your position, because you kind of see this from both perspectives, yeah? On the division of revenue between the two levels, the National Assembly has always agreed the National Treasury, have always agreed with the National Treasuries whose projections may not reflect the true cost of performing devolved functions. How is your committee going to ensure fairness and equity in resource allocation in light of the county's resources still held at the national level? And then also, how does that translate into financial success and systemic economic progress?
Thank you very much.
I hope that was not too much. There's a lot, there.
Thank you very much. It's a long one. But before I begin, let me first correct you that the way to look at the resources that are supposed to go to counties is not measured by the size of the national budget. As a matter of fact, national budget is composed of many other factors. National budget is funded by a multitude of resources, some of which are 1, public debt, 2, ordinary revenue, 3, grants from donors, and 4, fees and levies from public institutions. When you visit public institutions, you pay some levies. That is what we also use to fund national budget. So, but the Constitution is very clear that the only money that we share between national and county government is only ordinary revenue. So let us also be very clear on that, so that we don't look at the size of national budget and then we, now from that point, we begin to say that we need to send part of that money to the counties. We must restrict ourselves to what the law says. The law says that the only money that we share between national government and county government is ordinary revenue. And if you look at the ordinary revenue, as already explained by Eddie, the law says 15% of audited ordinary revenue. What we have recently audited is the 2021-2022 financial year revenues. Again, on that account, National Assembly takes a bluff for not working very quickly with the audits of revenues, as already finalized by the Auditor General. But I also must take the blame outside the National Assembly, because the process of auditing the revenues by National Assembly depends on many other factors, some of which are not within the purview of the National Assembly. For example, if we are to audit revenues for a particular ministry, let's say Ministry of Finance, then they have to. When we're auditing the accounts, then we have to get feedback from those ministries. If they delay to give us feedbacks and in the process, we end up not submitting our audits in time, you cannot blame National Assembly. Now, let me come back to your question. Why National Assembly is consistently in agreement with the National Treasury on Division of Revenue Bill. This is the combination of many factors, which I want to highlight. The first one is that we are supposed to review the functions that are assigned to national and to county governments regularly. If you look at the reports we have, the last time this review happened was in 2015. It means, therefore, that we are using outdated model. The framework we are using is outdated, and to be honest, the framework we have favors National Treasury. They favors National Treasury perspective. National Treasury perspective is largely aligned to national priorities, national government priorities. So because the framework is outdated, it therefore goes by the fact that National Treasury has a way, as a way in when it comes to the sharing of formula, sharing of revenue framework. The other issue which is a problem is revenue estimation. We have the CRA and we have the National Treasury and we have the Budget Office, Parliamentary Budget Office. Now, there's always a disagreement between the revenue that we project between these three agencies. Whereas devolved resources, whereas devolution relies on the reports from CRA, National Treasury, they have their own report about what revenue they are projecting. Us in Parliament, we have our own Budget Office. So because of these disagreements, as National Assembly, we tend to rely on our own reports, internal reports from our own Budget Office. And we go with that report. The other issue which is affecting, the other issue why we agree with the National Treasury again is also because there's a lot of pressure which National Treasury has to bear when it comes to revenue sharing. For example, things to do with public debt, these are roles exclusively reserved for national government, National Treasury. Therefore, because of the pressure they have to bear, in terms of managing the economy, we normally are very conservative when we are trying to share resources. Also because after the budget making process and the resources are shared, the law says that we can never, in case of revenue shortfalls, we will never go back to the revenue that you already assigned to devolution. So that shortfall is normally borne by the National Treasury, national government. So again, that also makes us to be very cautious, when we are thinking about sharing resources. Because again, in the recent past, as you are aware, we have had cases where our financial year has ended and all the transfers to county has not happened. It is only in this particular year, last financial year, that the government, the broad-based government did its best to ensure that all resources are transferred to county. We have had this problem in the past for several years. So again, having all these factors in mind, it tends to, affect how, we think about sharing of resources. But I want to confess that the pressure to push more resources to the counties is real, and we are doing our best at National Assembly to ensure that we send more resources to counties to ensure that services are delivered. If you look, for example, in this financial year, for the first time we have transferred about an increase of about 30 billion to counties. That has never happened in the recent past. So I must say that under my leadership as chairman of Budget and Appropriations Committee, we have been able to live up to our dream of having a workable and successful counties. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much. I think I'm hearing between the good senator and yourself that there's a lot of problems around coordination, right? And I'll come back to you maybe just to ask about, the common, the Wanjiko on the ground, me. I don't know about what's the Senate and the Parliament and the Senate and the National Assembly and this lack of agreement and the powers. I just want my services, right? So what are you doing now that Devolution is a teenager? We've been told it's a teenager now, almost a teenager, to resolve the coordination problem? Because if I want my healthcare delivered, I don't want to hear that there's a fight between the Senate and the National Assembly. I just want my health care. So that's something to consider. And I'll come back to you on that. I think you have something that you want to say now.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that based on the question you've asked, for example, there's no health resources that we are reserving at national government. So if there's any county or any governor who cannot deliver health services, that is the governor that should take the blame, not national government, not Parliament, because we have already given them resources for health, for example. All we are debating today is the transfer of certain functions that have not been transferred to counties. There are a number of functions that are still reserved in national government which need to go to counties. That is the only debate we need to have. But when you talk about health services, I want to make it very clear that counties are failing us. Counties are failing the country in provision of health services. They cannot blame national government, they cannot blame Parliament. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we go down to the county assembly. Bwana Honorable Chege Mwaura. As the head of the county, I think the Secretary General is what it's called, of the County Assemblies Forum, legislation is your bread and butter when it comes to the subnational government, right? We are thinking about legislation and frameworks to ensure that access to finance for MSMEs, where MSMEs are generally every business is in the county, right? So we are passing laws. We have national laws around the tax frameworks. We have subnational laws around own source revenues, and yet we have this kind of bit in between where young people are trying to start businesses. A lot, as we've heard, 80% of these young people are in the informal economy. And yet, that's also coupled with the fact that we hear legislation in Kenya is actually some of the most excellent, top-notch legislation you find in the world. But we're not seeing essentially the trickle down of the effects of that great legislation in terms of how is it ensuring that MSMEs are getting the access to finance, access to opportunities through the national share, and not being, and having a good environment for business, even in the sense of the really high burden on the tax environment. So the question I have is, apart from oversight, the county assemblies play a critical role on legislation. How can the county assemblies ensure the ease of doing business and promote access to finances by MSMEs and special interest groups from your perspective and from a legislative view?
Thank you. Maybe I first start from the process of how we get there in the first place, so that you get the sense of the legislation bit when it comes to assemblies. We start from a situation where before a county government comes into place, there's a governor who's going around campaigning, and hopefully he has a manifesto. Once he gets in, and Dr. Rugo talked about one of his 4 lines, quality services over structure. and he mentioned something to do with CIDP. Now, this manifesto usually is supposed to be embodied on the county integrated development plan. And then from there, you move it to a financial document called the annual development plan. And then it moves to the fiscal strategy paper, to budget estimates, to appropriations bill and financing that bill and actually spending. Now, for MSMEs, the laws that are supposed to be done should follow that process. So that if somebody mentioned that I'll give a fund for startups or whatever, what were the parameters that were put in place so that we're able to measure? Because members of county assemblies, you'll find in various counties, have come up with the personal private members bill initiatives that come into play. But now the mismatch becomes when the county executive is not able to uptake it and then put it into policy and then now make it a reality to these SMEs and all that. And so when you come from a county assembly's point of view, where our role is representation of legislation and oversight, as far as legislation bit is concerned, if there is a linkage between the executive and the assembly in passing those laws and the regulations thereof, then it becomes a bit easier when it comes to oversight. Because you're now going to be oversighting something that has been agreed by policy, that was brought in the assembly, and now you gauge the implementation. That really happens. I think that is number one, the gap that I've seen. And then again, number two, if you look at the Auditor General's reports, there's something called the receiver of revenue. The receiver of revenue reports brings in essentially what the county was able to collect, especially when it comes to own source revenue. There is no clear demarcation on what was, say, for single business permits based on SMEs. You get it? So you're not able to actually pinpoint that the growth that we are being told about own source revenue, and where was it attributed to? You can see the county here has made tremendous gains in terms of own source revenue. But what, in terms of SMEs, what are the drivers? Is it just sealing the loopholes, or is there a process and that is determined, that is strengthened to encourage businesses to grow? And so that becomes a big problem. And when I was seated there, I met a guy from KNBS, and I was saying, maybe these are some of the areas we can start working together, so that when we see this kind of data, we are able now to pinpoint these are the indicators that show us the areas to grow. But as far as legislation processes that are concerned, they're simply, in fact, we don't get enough business from the executive to be able to do the same. In terms of representation, of course, whatever happens, if for example, in my area, I come from a business area called Ngara, there's so many small-scale traders. But and the biggest fight is between how they are kicked out by the county government and how they return and all that. What are the processes that are done to formalize those kind of businesses, to register them, and also to quantify the kind of businesses and all that? And the opportunities that are given in terms of hustler funds and all that, is there a link that shows that this business got this kind of funding and then therefore their business has grown or not grown? Finally, if you look again in data, it says 70% of startups will die between the first 3 years of its existence. What are the policies that the county governments are coming up with so that we're able to say, this is a new startup? What kind of incentives are they being given, whether incubation or whatever, to ensure that they are sustainable, at least for the first 5 years? And what kind of support are we giving them in terms of maybe financial literacy, to be able to strengthen their books and all that, so that we at least ensure it passes the infancy as it grows. And finally, how do we ensure that it moves from maybe a one-person business to 2 or 3 as a way of working on the employment? Yeah.
And in the environment where MSMEs and even SMEs, you find that, of course, there were protests around the finance bill at the national level, but there's also taxes that come from own source revenues at the county level, which don't get as much attention. So the challenge or the question is, I mean, if you could picture like an SME, it's like an ever-shrinking room, right? You're in a room and the walls are closing in. So as a county assemblies, are you working closely with Bwana Tandi and the Senate around how do we make sure that everything we're collecting from the citizens, because we do need the money, the fiscal space is a challenge. But at the same time, economy cannot grow if the businesses do not see themselves as viable. Everything that they're raising is going back to government. It's a very tenuous situation. So how are you thinking about this, and how are you coordinating with your colleagues here in the panel?
To be honest, within the county circle, we work more with the Senate because at least we're in the same space of devolution. The national government and the national, National Assembly usually is within, the major laws that are actually the whole country at large. But between the Senate and the county assemblies, there are more linkages when it comes to how we work together. But then again, there still needs to be a more collaborative approach, so that some of the laws that we make, we find maybe Senate is also working on the same, and there is or within the 47 county assemblies, everyone is making their own individual law, instead of maybe using opportunities like the County Assemblies Forum to bring and harness best practices, and seeing maybe if we can come up with one good legislation that is agreeable at the county level and at the national level through the Senate and even to the national level, so that at least by the time you are passing with minimum changes, the bigger framework has been agreed upon and it's easier to implement. But the bigger question now remains of the interest of the county executives, which of course is the one that is run by governors as it were. If at the national level we've said 30% will be left for special interest groups, the youth, the PWDs, and the women, what kind of data do we have to show that we actually adhered to that? Dr. Luga happened to be in NMS working in Nairobi and now in the national. If we now use maybe the medical field, where do we have data that shows within the medical fraternity, what kind of businesses are we tapping into those three special interest group chapters in trying to support businesses around there? And where is this financing coming from? And once they get it, the other bigger problem comes in of payment. We have county governments are very easy to get jobs for and get procurement. But then when it comes to payment, we have a bigger problem of pending bills that now becomes crippling to the businesses within. And maybe you are an SME. A bigger business, maybe you'll be able to harness the shocks. But for special interest group chapters, special interest groups as per the Constitution, they get these jobs, the 30%. But if you delay their payments, then maybe they cripple, because the way the financing model has been done, they went to get a loan, which is expensive in the first place, and then having to pay it becomes a bigger problem and a bigger challenge at that time. So I agree with you. Yes, we need to find a way of working more legislatively, but more importantly, there must be a concerted effort from the executive to agree. The same way we are doing affirmative action in terms of giving those contracts, there must be affirmative action to pay them. Yeah.
And I'm glad I have such a powerful panel here, because I think at the end of this session, I'm going to ask you guys to make commitments here today, so that next time we have the next Devolution conference, we can follow up with your. I'm not done, so don't worry. I'm coming to you. Coordination is definitely a challenge, and I can see it in what you're speaking around. Now, I think you've really given me a great segue to go to the good PS, Dr. Luga, to talk about health. And health has really been reigning the news cycle in so many different ways, right? But one of the latest ones is around pending bills. Pending bills is directly linked to MSMEs and people who are supplying services to government. If we're unable to unlock the payments to MSMEs that are serving the sector, then the MSMEs suffer, but also the health sector suffers. And thinking around what has been happening this year, health is continues to be a very donor-reliant sector. But then now, essentially we're on our own, right? For better or for worse. We need to find the fiscal space. Health is largely devolved, but a very strong component of health is still delivered at the national level. So my question, and of course even you saw in the newspaper, Nairobi Hospital, a lot of challenges happening there. Shire and Schiff is having teething problems, and so some challenges there. So my question for you, within that context and within the context of what has been spoken of earlier, is that financial sustainability is critical to ensuring continued provision of public services, but health financing in the county is still dependent on external partners, which can be unsustainable, and this year has proven to be challenging. What innovative solutions would you consider and suggest to counties to ensure sustainable health financing, considering this dependence? And also, how do you create new innovations within the health sector to unlock pending bills and to unlock opportunities for the sector to thrive from a supply and demand perspective? I'm sorry, today I think I have very long questions. I hope you are following.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. So first and foremost, I think that your question has already been answered by the legislative and policy framework that we have under the health financing. But I will go back to what you mentioned about dependence on development partners, or basically aid-driven support, which stands at around 35% of our healthcare budget in the whole country, both county and national government combined. And 35% is not, it's not little. And because of Kenya being rebased as a lower middle income economy, it's becoming increasingly difficult to make a case for Kenya comparative to other poorer nations on why our healthcare system should still be financed by somebody else other than ourselves. This year, Kenya moved from position 8 to position 6 as one of the largest economies in Africa. That has implications. It's a good thing, but when you go with a begging bowl, then your case is dismissed. And this is a reality that the whole country must come to. And this is more than just political. It's a responsibility that every single Kenyan must take seriously, that our 35% that somebody else was giving us is now gone. We have about 4 years to transition from PEPFAR. We are transitioning from Danida. The FCDO has just deprioritized healthcare, and it's no longer in their priority. We have Gavi accelerated transition by 2029. The Global Fund has reduced funding by 40%, and the list goes on and on. And so what are we saying? What we are saying is that we must get our money from our pockets. Now, how do we get this money? Right now, we are talking about financial inclusivity. So what does that mean? For us in health, it's very simple. It means that every single person has a mechanism to finance their health needs. Now, how do we make that not dependent on that person and their socioeconomic status? So we create a health financing tool that can mobilize resources or can pool the resources, but can also pool the risks. So what are these risks? The risks is about who is it that is sick that needs treated? Who is it that is healthy that can support that sick person? Who is it that has money that can pay for the person who doesn't have money? Who is it that is old? Who is it that is young? So we have to start from a risk analysis. What is our disease profile? What are the things that make Kenyans die? And what are those diseases that make Kenyans poor? And I'll give a very good example here. For example, on dialysis. So if you subject an ordinary Kenyan to paying for their own dialysis, dialysis costs around 1.1 million shillings a year. If you subject any ordinary Kenyan to pay for their own dialysis, chances are that they will sell their land, and they will only sell it for the first year. And most of our land in the rural areas are not worth 1.1 million because of the way it's been subdivided, the size and all of that. So they will have to sell their land and the neighbor's land and the community land. And that's the same land they use for agricultural production for food. So what is it that, and if they don't get dialysis, they will die. If you don't get dialysis for about 24 hours, you will die. So that is the basic principle of how we look at financing our healthcare system. So if you look at every single thing that we have listed in the Social Health Authority benefit package, the things that are important, they are things that either protect a Kenyan from dying and protect them from being poor. That's what we call financial inclusivity. And we make it equal whether you have money or you don't have money, so that all of us are starting from the same level. Now, this mechanism or this tool of health financing requires that we all participate in it. The participation of it also needs to be inclusive, or what we call equitable. So if I have money, the risk for me of being poor by contributing is less than the person who doesn't have money. And this is what we did. For example, the total health expenditure in Kenya is around 550 billion. Out of this 550 billion, what exactly can be financed by the government and what can be financed by the individuals? So I've already mentioned what the government does is the things that are likely to make you die or to make you poor. But there are some things, for example, if you have a common cold and you go to a facility, you may not have much money, you may be struggling, the doctor may require 200 or 500 shillings, you may call Dr. Luga to give it to you, but that may not make you die, neither will it make you poor. So the whole premise about our healthcare financing is that. So there is a 150 billion, for example, that people still finance by their own pockets. And it's the small things that do not either aggravate your disease, it doesn't make you die, doesn't make you poor. And I think it's important that the country understands this so that then we don't think that everything can be financed in a space of limited resources. Because you also don't want to overburden people with the taxes, and I'm coming there. So there are also two ways of now, this other 400 billion that remains. There is a 2.7% penetration of what we call private insurance. Now, private insurance in total in the whole country is just around 98 billion. All of them combined, all the 26 medical insurance providers. So it's nothing much. And then if you combine together with what we call medical funds, for example, institutions that don't have insurance but have their own medical funds, around 98 billion. So then there is still a 302 billion that the government must do. Some of it comes through taxes that go to payment of healthcare workers, products that we buy. Some of it then now comes through the taxes that we give to the Social Health Authority in form of the Primary Healthcare Fund, where we have 13 billion, the Emergency Fund, where we have 8 billion. But then there is still a component that we must contribute. Now, not every Kenyan has the ability to contribute. So who contributes? Those who are employed. Again, those who have income through other mechanisms, whether it's a business or farming, you have to contribute. So this is why we have the Social Health Insurance Fund, where we are telling Kenyans, if you're employed, you contribute 2.75%. If you're not employed, we go through a mechanism of determining what is your capacity to contribute. Because somebody who is selling in a market around Homa Bay selling fish is very different from somebody who is running a matatu business. Both of them are not employed, but one has more income. One can contribute 50,000 shillings a month, another one can't. So we have to also have inclusivity in terms of determining what's your status of contribution. But there are also those who can't, the people that we call indigents, and this is where devolution comes in. These people who can't contribute, first of all, we must find ways of bringing them in through support. And we've been working with county governments to identify, and a number of county governments have agreed to support 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 people that they have to pay for. Yeah. And so I think for us, financial inclusivity is extremely practical. Yeah. It's not something that we can sit here and theorize. Because tomorrow and today, somebody is in a hospital and they must get the service, and that service must be paid for, whether by themselves or by the government.
Yeah. And we bring up a very interesting perspective. And in my mind, I'm already wondering, you know, if the fiscal space is already tight, we've already taken out a lot of the development financing, especially that was coming from USAID, and the other is also decreasing. We are then also in a heavy tax environment, expecting patients to pay a fee for some, towards some of their services. My question, and I think now we're starting to see the pattern of the question I have here. You're part of the executive. How are you working with these guys who are deciding the money? You said you have to close that fiscal space very soon, that 35%, you have to find that money. How are you working with the nationalists, with Parliament, to resolve some of these issues? What's the innovation? Because it has to be an innovation solution somewhere.
So the innovation is already in the policy, and the policy is what we present to, and my chair is here. I think Dr. Nyikal is here, the chair of our health committee. So we are on call with him every single day, but there's also a policy framework. Okay. So the financing must be based on the policy. So first of all, what exactly do we want to finance in our healthcare? So there are critical components of the healthcare system that we work with the National Assembly and the National Treasury to ring fence. So the things that are very key for us, for example, vaccination, issues that relate to human resources for health, issues that relate to, for example, oxygen, blood, all these things that we have decided we have to ring fence. But then there is also the things that have to be paid for through the benefit package, which we work with the National Assembly to increasingly provide more resources for those, like the primary healthcare fund. And I think it is important that I clarify here that the primary healthcare services, our healthcare system has already been organized, and we are keen on a publicly financed primary healthcare system. And a publicly financed primary healthcare system means it is tax funded. That is why the president has kept mentioning level 2, level 3, and outpatient level 4 should be a walk-in and walk-out, because the government has already taken that burden by itself and put 13 billion to make sure that all primary healthcare services are reimbursed. And that forms 65% of all the services in the whole country. Then there is 35% of services that remain. 30% of these services are services that require surgery, require some level of intervention. These are the ones that are financed through the contributions, the Social Health Insurance Fund. Then there is a 5% of services that are quite costly and they don't depend on the individual, like going to the ICU or getting an emergency or chronic diseases like cancer. Now, that is where we have also worked with the National Assembly and the National Treasury to ensure that is also tax funded. For example, if you get cancer, that's why we say the Social Health Authority pays 600,000. So this 5%, that's where dialysis is, that's where cancer is, that's where ICU is, that is where emergency medical treatment. And the National Assembly has also appropriated 8 billion. So we are looking at financial inclusivity from an extremely practical perspective that ensures that at the bottom of the pyramid, the 65% of services, for example, maternity, people who go into the dispensaries and the level 2s,
Yeah.
They don't spend anything. So that is covered by government.
Okay.
And then there's 30% of services, but those 30% of services still cost money, the surgeries. So you can wait for that surgery for 2 months, for example. You will get it, but we are asking for contributions.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, and I'll come back when we're closing just to ask around those three tensions. Number one, we need to find fiscal space. Number two, we need to still pay debt. And number three, we still need to release the pressure on businesses and households. That is the big question that we're trying to answer today. And I'll come back to each of you to give me your commitments around that. And as you're thinking about that, I want to turn to Dr. Tipo. Thank you so much for being here. And I want you to give us a perspective of the marginalized communities, especially those indigenous communities that are often in ASAL regions, right? These face extreme, and devolution actually was supposed to resolve this, right? Part of the goals of devolution was to ensure that resources are getting to the areas that were marginalized before. So we're thinking about exclusion from credit markets, from infrastructure investment, agricultural chain financing, yet the economic potential remains quite high. So my question to you, Dr. Tipo, is the right of communities to manage their own affairs is enshrined in our constitution. However, indigenous communities' participation in the national discourse on PFM has been very minimal. How do we get their voices heard?
Thank you. Can you come up with your question again, please? Thank you. I was struggling with the mic. Say the question again. Yes, please, can you say the question again?
Okay. How can indigenous communities whose participation in the public finance process has been quite low start to engage more effectively?
Thank you for the question. I think I just want to start by appreciating this opportunity. And as you said, I'm currently the representative for Tanzania, but I'm covering Kenya for about a year now. So I just want to start by what we do as FAO and to just highlight that FAO put a high value on the integrity of the work we do and we do with our member states, especially the government. But the issue of inclusivity is highly, is highly prioritized at our global level in our strategies. So that comes down to what we do in our country programming framework with the country, and we really value the role of the devolved governments because we know that they are closer to the communities, they engage very close in consultation. So all our programming, much as it is done at the national level with the Treasury, we know the supervisory role which is played by the national government, but we believe that actions are taken at the county levels. That's why we engage with the governors and all the governments of the counties. So our programming focuses on engagement, and we make sure that all the marginalized communities are part of the planning process. They are part of the developing projects, and also we have a marker that we follow very closely when we are developing such projects. But we also ensure that everything we do is part of the integrated plan for the county offices.
And what frameworks are you using to make sure that those conversations are integrated in the budgeting processes?
So our framework, we have a 5-year plan, which is called Country Programming Framework, which is done together with the government, and we align it to the National Development Plan. And this is aligned to the entire UN Development Plan, which is also kind of focusing on what the government of Kenya is planning to do in the next plan. So we have a CPF, as it's called, and this CPF is prioritized based on what priorities each country has, or each county has. As for ASAR region, we do believe and we understand that they have been marginalized. They are the most affected by the climate change. We have been planning with them. Recently, like a week ago, we launched a project in Lodwar with CS ASAL and the governor of Turkana, which is focusing on the value chains which are specific to the ASAR region.
Okay.
And soon we are going to launch in every county with the governors. The governor of Turkana was with us, but we also heard their voices from the local communities saying that you have to focus on the locals. You have to engage them in the consultation, you have to engage them in the decision making, and that's what we are going to do during the inception phase to ensure that their voices are heard, the marginalized, the women, the disabled people, the indigenous communities, they have to be all included in our planning process with the county.
Yeah, and I think the work of the development partners is quite important, ensuring that you're supporting processes that are already being done, but in this environment of reduced support, and actually maybe you can speak about this, how are you working to ensure that there's sustainability, that the government is not always looking for a way out or a support, and that we can actually, in a few years, be able to stand on our own 2 feet. What is your thinking of development partners from that perspective?
Okay, thank you for this question. I think it's very important when you have a plan to put the sustainability aspect to it at the end of the grant or any funding. How will it continue? And that's why we work with the counties to ensure that the county integrated plan takes into consideration the sustainability aspect. If we have a project for 5 years, what next after the 5 years? They have to have some public finance budgeting process to carry over from where the project stops. And that's where our planning with the counties comes in, from the word go. So they understand the project, we plan with them, and they also put more resources from the public fund to let it continue after the funding ends from the from the donor community.
Yes, and I think we've come to a reckoning, especially this year around this, so we'd like to hear some more of those going forward. And Ms. Gituku, thank you also for being here, and I think it was also a good segue to talk about excluded groups. And one of the key objects of devolution is promote social and economic development and the provision of easily accessible services throughout Kenya. What actionable strategies should be employed to ensure resource allocation at both levels of government, support socioeconomic development, and service delivery at the grassroots level?
Thank you, moderator, and to the other panelists. I think earlier, before this session, we had KNBS and the State Department and other development actors talking about data. And I want to start from there. I think we need to improve the way we show up in our public finance management cycle by raising the value and the premium that we put on data, the extent to which data inform how we allocate our resources. And the Bureau, of course, have done a fantastic job in producing data on socioeconomic data, on vulnerable people, and data also includes what we collect from public participation, citizen-generated data. Unfortunately, my experience for 13 years working with counties and doing advocacy at the grassroots is that we put more weight on the governor's manifesto, on the strength of your MCA and your MP in terms of lobbying, and that leaves us more on what I would call politics-based budgeting than need-based budgeting. So, and for me, this is really a political choice that we have to make, that we make a decision to allocate resources based on where the needs are, because that is the only way you can reach the excluded population. The other opportunity that I see is, the other day I went to apply for a loan, and I went into the bank determined to negotiate the rate, because the rate now I think is like 17%, which is exorbitant. And I said I'm going to negotiate the rate down. When I asked the person who was serving me, they told me you can negotiate it down if your payslip is lit and based on your address. And whereas that sounded good to me at a personal level, I was left wondering, where does this leave the poor person who doesn't have a payslip, or they have a very weak payslip, or whose address looks risky to the bank? This population that is living in extreme poverty, that is at the bottom of the pyramid, need protection. And that protection would come in terms of national government and county government partnering with financial service provider, injecting some public finance for onward lending or even for credit guarantees, despite their limitation. We have seen that development partners, the World Bank, MasterCard Foundation, they are using those models to finance the youth, to finance GBV survivors, and they have worked to a big extent. But those partners alone, without the active participation of government, cannot achieve scale. So we might never realize the transformative impact that we seek. The other thing, where I see an opportunity is unlocking the barrier around insecure tenure rights. And I say this because counties has a function as custodian of community land, of course, upon which when they are registered, they are supposed to be handed off to the respective communities. And of course, there is the other category of land where the mandate rests elsewhere. And we know that people use land to participate in the financial market as collateral. Unfortunately, our land system is really, I would say it is troubled. It's troubled with stalled succession. It is, I think we are only around 40-something%. I saw Usna from FAO and Dr. is here from FAO. They are the custodian of land indicators in the SDGs. I think we have around 40-something% of community land that is registered. But that is where most of these communities that we call poor are living in. If we are not going to accord them formal rights and accelerate that process of granting them formal rights and autonomy to use their land as productively as they so wish, how are they going to be included in the financial market? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think we've had some great insight today, and I really love the coordination between you all, because it's like when one piece is missing something, someone else has a solution. So for me, really, the question is, how are we coordinating to get to where we need to go? We talked about the tension between the fiscal space, paying our debt obligations, and also releasing the burden on business. And I earlier said that I was going to ask each one of you to make a quick commit, 1 minute, a commitment that you will make that we will look forward to progress in the next Devolution conference. And I want to hear, number one, in the context of what we spoke about, the commitment you're making, the impact you expect it to have, and the success the citizens will experience because of it. So the commitment you're making, the impact you expect it to have, and the success that the citizens will experience because of it. Now, Bwana PS, you look like you're nodding. You have a ready answer for me as others are thinking through theirs.
Thank you so much. So for us, it's, as I mentioned, so first, everything is very important until you get sick. Then you realize that your health was the most important thing. Even coming to this Devolution conference, sitting here in this panel, it's extremely important. You don't want to miss anything until you get sick. And you can't do any of those things. Then you realize that your health was the most important thing. So, for the small businesses, the best way to protect your business is to get the people who work for you to be insured. And you want to make a very strong case for the Social Health Insurance Fund. So the small business, including SMEs, because you will not insure them, one person will get sick from your business, it will cost you 950,000, and you will wipe off all the capital, including all the money that you're being given from the Nyota, whether you're getting it from Asla Fund, whether the governor is giving it to you. One disease, one employee will wipe out all your capital if you have to help them. And so there can be no better case than protecting the people who work for you. And we want to make this case for every single person, whether you are selling fish somewhere or selling grains, or you have a big business, you have a hardware. Because this is how we get to financial sustainability for our healthcare system, and that's the impact that we will have, so that we are self-reliant. And for me, there's no better case for financial inclusion than you taking that action. Everything is extremely important, including your business, until you get sick. then nothing else ever mattered other than your health. Thank you.
So what's your commitment to us?
The commitment to us is that for us, what we have done is to profile the diseases and to make sure that the money that you contribute, the money that comes from the taxes, is prioritized. And we are working very well with the county governments, but the county governments must help us do something else, which we are also committing to reform hospitals to give the services that we say we will pay for. Because sometimes citizens also suffer. The Social Health Authority or the Ministry of Health can say that we are paying for your cancer, but you come to the facility managed by the county and they don't give that service. So they have to invest in that service so that the healthcare system performs.
So it's your commitment to ensure that you're going to work very closely with the county health
which we are
facilities,
already doing. Thank
and
you
we're
so
going to
much.
look for that impact when we see you next. Senator Okech, your commitment, the impact it will have, and the success you expect to see the next time we talk to you.
Okay, we are here now. Yeah, I just wanted to make it make two things clear before I say my commitment. One, the role of Senate has been wavy because of the fact that Senate does not have full legislative role that the Parliament should have, limited by the fact that Senate does not deal sometimes with, or rather does not originate money bills that come into the country. And I think that that is a commitment that I can tell you for a fact that the Senate as a House will make to ensure that we sponsor a bill that can ensure that there is, an expanded role of the Senate in terms of ensuring that we can be able to engage in all money bills and other legislation that sometimes make the National Assembly not be able to give the Devolution family what it needs in conjunction with the national government.
So I'm hearing that you're committing to ensure that you work much closer with your colleagues here.
No, I'm saying the Senate is going to commit to actually bring a conversation with the nation to make sure that there is an expanded role of the Senate in the legislative process where they cannot be able to engage in. But that said, what is killing devolution are three things that I want to say very fast, and each of them with my commitment in them.
Okay.
Number one is that counties are still faced with a strong challenge of running non-discretionary budgets instead of having money left for them to run discretionary budgets. Non-discretionary budgets are budgets that they cannot avoid. These are monies that are committed to. They are paying, for instance, payroll issues of housing levy. They've got issues of NSSF. There's issues of community health promoters. There's issues of CBAs that has been signed with doctors. These monies of non-discretionary expenses are boggling counties in terms of the money that they get, the 415 billion that we have now increased under the negotiation by the Senate. And we need to start finding a way of giving counties more money to allow them also do development, because devolution is only devolution and inclusion is only inclusion when you go beyond paying payrolls. You go beyond that and be able to do development.
So what I'm hearing you saying is that there's also fragmented funds that do not serve the people because of those fragmented funds may not actually be addressing the issues that they need to address. And your commitment is to ensure that we have better flow of funds.
Our commitment, and I speak on behalf of the Senate, because this is what we do. Our commitment is to fight for more resources to be given to counties so that they don't only run payroll, but they can be also able to run more development projects.
Thank you.
The third issue that I wanted to finish with is the issue of clawing back on devolution. The idea that there are functions that are still stuck by the national government, and they are clearly stated by the Constitution that they are functions of the counties. For instance, I don't mean to put my brother here on the spot, but everything that Dr. Luga has talked about is just, in simple word, clawing back on devolution. Because if you look at the Constitution, the only functions under health that are given to national government is running national referral hospitals, which right now are 6. Even if you're giving them 6 billion each or even 10 billion each, they should not have a budget of about 120 billion when counties are now forced to push their budgets beyond 30% of each individual budget trying to run health. Because the money is stuck at the national level. Policy and referral hospital is what they should be able to run. But you can see that now the primary health care has been attacked, where now the national government is just taking over the entire national. That we need to fight.
Thank you,
but then the biggest thing that I wanted to make clear is that inclusion in terms of what should get to the people cannot be inclusion if the money that is sent to governors and the devolution family do not get to the people. The issue of oversight is something that I commit to and the Senate commits to, because that role of oversight, where you find that sometimes every 5 years you end up, instead of creating 47 governors, you create 47 billionaires because MCAs cannot oversight governors properly enough. It is very important that the nation understands that the role of the Senate in oversight cannot be given to the Senate by either the president or the former prime minister, because the role of the Senate to oversight is in the Constitution, and it is also defined by Supreme Court ruling on petition number 24 of 2019, consolidated with petition number 27 of 2019, that the Senate will summon the governors as well as the executive to be able to hold them to account where MCAs don't have capacity to deal with the governors. And we can assure you that our commitment as a Senate, we will make sure that governors don't waste resources that have been sent to them by the senators from the national government.
Thank you very much. I know we have to close very soon. So guys, 1 minute, one quick minute, please.
Thank you. Thank you. Since my role in devolution is division of revenue, I want to make the following observations. One, we are National Assembly is committed to full transfer of devolved function. But when we go through the normal mediation process over division revenue bill between Senate and National Assembly, senators raise those transfer functions at that stage. I want to tell senators that National Assembly does not have the powers to devolve functions. So, but this can be done progressively. For example, we have the Intergovernmental Relations Technical Committee that has been working on this. I want to urge senators who are here that don't wait for us to fight over division revenue bill. You need to begin from today, you need to begin engagement with National Treasury and various government agencies, including accountants in government and finance officers, so that you can identify those functions that you think need to be devolved early. Once you identify those functions, then they can form part of our next division revenue bill and also BPS, budget policy statement. That is one. Two, I must also question that.
We need to wrap up.
I want to question that one of the threats to devolution is unrealistic expectations. Everybody is expecting more resources, people on the grassroots, leaders, but they are not opening up for accountability. The reason why National Assembly has been slow in pushing more resources to counties is because governors are not doing their best. They're not putting their best foot forward. For example, if governors are not going to be oversighted by the Senate, some governors will just leave the country and be outside the country for years. They will just come back for elections. Senate needs to oversight governors. They need to appear in Senate so that they can be able to answer. We know governors who just disappear and they don't come to the country to serve.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Very quick, please.
Ongai, 2 points. Number one, the commitment for county assemblies is to engage more with the institutions like KNBS to get the data better so that we're able to have more data-driven when it comes to financial inclusion for especially the special interest groups. Number two, with the Office of the Auditor General, so that maybe that parameter is also included when they're doing their reports with regards to measures that have been taken. But it's important to mention that one of the hallmarks of this conference was the president assenting to the financial autonomy for county assemblies. Senator Eddy talks about assemblies not having the capacity. Build that capacity. it's not enough to point fingers and say, these guys have no capacity. The first step is the financial autonomy. I've seen the CS treasuries here. We now have a financial autonomy for county assemblies. Let us resource the county assemblies properly so that you can get the outcome you're looking for, better oversight. And success is when we are able to oversight better and legislate better at the county levels, then it means even the load that goes to the Senate is better synthesized, and a lot of the smaller issues have been taken care of, and I agree with them. Let the guys be, oversight happen at the primary level, the county assemblies, and secondarily at the Senate.
Excellent, excellent. I see coordination and harmonization already happening. Less than a minute.
Oh, thank you. I think mine is just to touch on the multifaceted sector of the agri-food system. And our ambition is to see a transformed, sustainable agri-food system in Kenya. Not Kenya alone, but globally. And for FAO, my commitment is to ensure that FAO support is granted to the devolved functions, but also to the national government for us to have better planning, better policies that can address such transformation. And if you hear all the panelists were talking about health, MSEs, this all boils down to food. So a transformed agri-food system which is multi-sectoral, which touches on every sector in the country is our wish, and we are here to commit our support to Kenya.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, Ms. Githuku.
Thank you. I work in the philanthropic sector, private philanthropy. And we resource community development, human and women rights. My commitment is that we will use those resources to strengthen citizen agency so that they can hold these senators, the executive, and the entire system accountable. The people are still the best watchmen.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I think with that, I want to thank you so much for this intense and insightful discussion. I want to thank the panelists for being here. I think it was, you've given us a lot of insight, and I'm hoping that we're going to hold you to a few of the commitments that I had. Some of them I didn't hear, but it's okay, we'll still follow up. I thank the audience for your participation and your attentiveness. Let's make sure that we keep everybody accountable to what they've committed and to their roles according to the Constitution. And I want to say thank you, and I hope to see you next time. Everybody, applause for the panelists.